Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Icon Online. I'm so glad that you're all joining us today. And today, for time's sake, we are just going to kind of jump right into things this morning. And just so you know, actually, everything this morning is pre recorded. Typically, what we've been doing is we've been live streaming from our in person service, but I am actually traveling this weekend. And just to kind of simplify things, we are doing two separate things. So, Pastor Sabrina is with our in person folks right now. And this morning, for all of you, we are actually going to play a previously recorded conversation that we did on a Sunday morning about around a year ago. And it's a little bit on the longer side. And so we wanted to kind of get into it pretty quickly, but just to give you a little bit of a kind of a heads up of what we're going to be talking about is a conversation that we had on deconstructing faith. And for some of you that are, maybe have been joining Icon just relatively recently, I just think it was such a good conversation. There were so many important perspectives that were brought up. And I think, all of us are on this faith journey of learning new things and reimagining what our faith looks like and, kind of changing our mind maybe about different theological beliefs that we've held for a long time. And actually next week, we are going to be doing another community conversation on how to parent through shifts in your faith. What do you do when you're raising kids and you are questioning things or you are still figuring out your faith? And what does that look like when it comes to the way that we parent our kids? And so we're going to have that conversation next week. It's actually inspired by last week's conversation that we were having about kind of this idea of following your heart. And someone in the chat was like, hey, how has your faith shifting, how has that affected your parenting? And so Amanda was like, we should do a conversation about that. And so I thought that for this week, just kind of talking about faith deconstruction would be a really good precursor to what we're talking about next week. So we're going to go ahead here in just a second and we're going to play that conversation. And again, just so you know, this is all pre-recorded. So if you say hi to me in the chat and I don't respond, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just not there because I am traveling this week. But feel free to engage with one another in the chat, to share your own perspectives, to ask questions about the conversation that you are watching, and just feel free to engage there. It's one of my favorite parts about online service is being able to engage in the chat and hear different people's perspectives and that sort of thing. So we're going to go ahead and go into that conversation. I hope you guys enjoy. And then after that, we'll come back here just for a quick minute, and then we'll let you guys be on your way. So here is our conversation about deconstructing our faith. All right, well, welcome everybody. We are so excited to have you here with us this morning for this really important conversation where we are talking about deconstructing faith. And I think, there are probably people that are watching or listening today that land in really different places. There might be some people that hear that phrase, deconstructing faith, and be like, I don't even know what that means. There will probably be some people watching that are maybe already familiar with that and well on their journey into that and have been sort of shifting on some things and changing their mind and really diving deep into their own personal faith and what that looks like. And then there might be some people that will hear us talking and go, oh, that's what's happening to me. And so wherever, I just want everyone to know, wherever you find yourself this morning, that is totally fine, that we are not having this conversation to try to tell you how you should be wrestling with your faith or to tell you how you should feel about your faith. We just want to normalize this idea of bringing questions and doubts and really deeply interrogating the things, especially the things that we've believed for a really long time, that sometimes when we stop and think about them, we start to realize that maybe those things aren't necessarily serving us well or serving others in the world well. And it can cause us sometimes to have just these deeply rooted questions about things maybe we have believed one way for our whole life, and then all of a sudden maybe our lived experience doesn't so much line up with that anymore, and it can start to feel like things are unraveling. And so today we just want to have a conversation about shifting in our beliefs and what happens when you do have really big doubts and questions, and how can we create a safe place for people to be able to ask questions and to change their mind about things, because church should be the safest place for people to wrestle with their faith, but often it isn't. And so we're just going to have a conversation about that this morning. So to start off, I'm just going to have our three wonderful conversationalist panelists, whatever you want to call everybody, go ahead. And if you guys could just each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about either your work or just kind of who you are, so everyone can get to know you a little bit.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I'll just go clockwise. So, hey guys, my name is Catherine Shackelford. I actually met everybody at Icon back in 2014 in San Marcos and Kyle. So I've kind of been associated or interacting with the church for a while. It's kind of like taken different turns, and now I'm on and I'm participating in the live chats as well. So I'm an anthropologist. I'm a writer, cultural anthropology. I write currently for the Oxford Review, and this past summer I was writing social justice articles for the National Diversity Council, which was really cool. So I got really involved in all of that stuff that was going on last year, and it was pretty interesting. But yeah, now I'm still writing, as you can see, because I have my notes today. But yeah, it's been fun.
Awesome.
Okay,
Well, I guess I'll jump in and go next. I don't remember. I'm Craig, by the way. I don't remember a time where I was not a Christian. For many of us that grew up in the church, there's kind of this interesting blend of both heritage and faith. And so I was a Christian because everyone in my family and everyone in my community were Christians, and all good Swedes go to church, and the Lutheran church. So I grew up Lutheran. Then I was ordained as a pastor in the Assemblies of God. I know it's a kind of a drastic difference. And then now I'm whatever I am today. I don't really know what I am today outside of just a Christian, but I spent the last, Kelly and Dan and we go way back, like a couple of decades way back. And I spent the last couple of decades in ministry, and similar experiences to Kelly and Dan, but in primarily fundamentalistic evangelical environments. Now I have shifted gears, and my focus is primarily with those who find themselves in between. They still find the idea of following Christ or following the way of Christ as compelling, but in many ways they are disenfranchised from the church. And I can't just speak for everybody, because for everybody's story is different. But if I were to summarize it in kind of churchy religious language, it's kind of like, because they feel that the institution itself has consistently violated the great commandments. Love God and love your neighbor. And I think particularly that second part, love your neighbor. As I talk to a lot of people, the reason I got into this work is for many of them, the church, it no longer feels like the church is the best place to love God and love your neighbor. And maybe it never was. For many people, as I talk to them, the church is this place where consumerism and nationalism and militarism and sexism and racism and partisanship is dressed up as Christianity, and they don't really want anything to do with that anymore. For many people, they look at church and they go, well, this is the place where people go to hide from reality for an hour a week while continuing in conversations and activities that actively oppress marginalized communities, and then prop that up as truth. Or, for many people, a consistent theme that I hear is, the church is the place where you go to receive oversimplified answers to questions no one is asking. And so that's kind of the work that I do now. It's different. Like I've never walked this path before, and it's exciting and scary. And it's particularly fun when other friends like at Icon Church are on a similar journey. So
very cool.
I guess it's my
I'll get off
turn
my
now.
soapbox now.
No, good.
Hi everyone, my name is Amin, and well, I think everything that Craig said, I think I resonate with that. I think my hesitation to join this call to begin with was actually I told Pastor Kelly that I was an atheist for about 12 years, and so whatever Craig was talking about, I completely understand. I've experienced that myself really strongly as well. And but currently I'm doing a degree in theology. So it's a 360, 180 switch for me. And I think my journey back to faith was mostly based on just saying that you ask the Holy Spirit when books will drop on your feet. And I think that was just a series of synchronicities that happened, and I joined Icon about 2.5 months ago, and I'm so glad I did, because now we have this opportunity to have this kind of conversations. So yeah.
Okay, so today we just have some questions that we're gonna be asking, and just so that we can kind of get the conversation flowing here. And the first thing is, and some of you talked a little bit about this in your introduction, but I just wonder if each of you could just talk a little bit about what is your background when it comes to faith. So maybe that's how you were raised, or like kind of what you've been familiar with for a lot of your life. What does that look like for each of you?
Okay, just keep this one. So for me, my parents used to be in the Way ministry when I was a kid. They actually found out later that it was a cult.
Oh.
And it's crazy because if you actually search online now and type in Way ministry, the word cult automatically pops up next to it.
Wow.
And so basically they left, and we participated in Bible studies at a friend's home with other Christians. So after that, it was very kind of free-spirited, a lot less controlled and organized. And we basically visited other churches during high school to see if we liked them. So they were kind of still kind of probing and looking for another church home, but we never really got there after that. Mm-hmm. Nothing ever really clicked. So I think my parents were just kind of gun shy about joining another group. And then they didn't want to be lied to, basically just controlled again, because they had to go through a lot of healing after all of that and figure out and find a place where they felt like they weren't going to be like misled, basically. And then by the time I got to college, I still wasn't a church member anywhere. I kind of repeated the same pattern where I would check out a group, then go in on my own for a long time. So I had my own separate relationship with God, but I wasn't really involved in anything. And then I gave up on joining a church because I felt like a lot of Christians were judgmental. And I had my own relationship with them and just kind of kept it separate, talked to him every day. I did my own thing, and I kind of loved God from a distance. So that's where I started. So I kind of retained a lot of the fundamental stuff and the practices like prayer and things like that. But we definitely took a more freestyle approach after that, and it wasn't as structured. So.
I shared a lot about this, so I'll keep it short, but I think one little nugget for me that might be a nuance growing up as a Christian and being between two very different denominational worlds and then going into ministry in one of those. But, I think as I started to become exposed more to evangelicalism, it was tough because a lot of people talked about very religious terminology that I wasn't familiar with. Like, when did you get saved? And I didn't have like a really good answer. for that question because there wasn't a singular moment for me. And so it was kind of like I kind of made up a story so that I didn't feel like I was an outsider.
Yeah.
Because I never, within that culture, I had never responded to an altar call. I never prayed the sinner's prayer. I never, I was baptized as an infant. And apparently that's a really bad thing when you're in certain denominational environments. And so when I was exposed to a lot of those concepts, I was already a committed Christian. And so it felt like, why would I go backwards? And, many people can point to like a date or a singular story of when things changed for them. And for me, that just really wasn't the case. So that was, even as I was leading ministries and pastoring, like that was always in the back of my mind, because it's like my story. Can I just be a Christian? Can I just be a pastor and not hear a voice from heaven that called me into that? And so I don't know, everybody's story is unique, but those are a couple of little nuances, I guess, from my background.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of had the same issue growing up because, I mean, we had just always been Christians. There was never a moment where I was like, okay, I have to go do this now, or where my family like had me go up and get baptized. I actually did get baptized on Easter in like college, I think, when I was like kind of doing that back and forth shifting thing between whether I was going to actively pursue a relationship and like where I was spiritually and stuff. But it was definitely much, much later. People always ask me, and I was like, oh, well, I've always been a Christian. Like, is there like a time when I'm supposed to qualify for it? Or, so yeah, it was always really interesting. It's like, okay, well, yeah, kind of been this way forever, but all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I grew up in an extremely religious family, but I knew I was gay from when I was 5. So every single time I go to Sunday school, and it would just hit me like a knife stabbing at you, and the Sunday school teacher will always stare at you, and when she talks about things like Sodom and Gomorrah, and she will like look at you, and everyone's like looking at you as well. So I think for me, it's like the reason I started to leave faith was because I think it was a psychological attempt for me to, as a psychological self-preservation, just to be able to live my life without thinking that I am an abomination, or just that idea of like waking up every day and thinking, oh my God, if today is the day that I die, I'm going to hell,
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, I can do every single thing that scripture says, but I don't think I can change this bit, like I can be a virgin until I probably will never marry, but I still remember that I can be every single thing, but I cannot change this bit. And that was the thing that led me to abandon faith. And I would say I was an atheist for about 12 years. And after that, I started experimenting with different Abrahamic religions. I was reading the Torah, I was reading the Muslim and the Quran. I was just trying to see where I can fit within that Abrahamic system. And then I was introduced to Taoism by a friend, and I started visiting temples. And I think things started to fall into place, and I started doing meditations. I started looking at spirituality from a universal standpoint. And I think it was just one thing after another. And I think in just one day, I thought to myself, like, I think it's time for me to take away this lens that I was looking at religion and Christianity, and I thought maybe it would change how I perceive things and how I would look at it. And I think that was what changed for me. And obviously, I come back to the fact that when I found Icon, it was really like something that I resonated with, and the community that you built together with the people here, they're so welcoming and they are open and they're having these conversations. And I think that was the thing that led me back to where I am now.
Wow. Gosh, when you said that about it was an act of self-preservation for you to leave the faith, like that, man, that just like sits so deeply in my soul when I hear that, because I know that you are not the only one, and I know that your story is going to resonate with a lot of other people who are watching, you know, whether that be because they're gay or trans, or you know, because for some other reason they felt like, you know, who they were wasn't acceptable within that kind of Christian culture. And goodness, like that is a real thing that I think, you know, as the church, we have to reckon with that, and we have to look at that honestly and say, you know, there are certain things that I think that we try to require of people that makes people feel like, well, then if this is what I have to do to be a part and to belong, well, like you said, you can't change it. You know, so yeah, that resonated with me so much when you said that.
But the thing was that for the longest time, I always thought that it was something I could change. You know, just maybe I wasn't praying hard enough. Maybe um, I was not thinking it hard enough. And I remember when I was 5, I would hit my head against the wall just so that I could get the gay out of it.
Oh
You
my
know,
God.
just so yeah. I think I have my ex-boyfriends to testify the fact that I there were parts in my life where I was telling them that I wanted to be straight. So,
Oh
yeah.
God, amen. Wow. I mean, that is it's like, that just sits so, you know what I mean? It's like, I just can't fathom, you know, and I think that's a big thing, you know, I know for me, when I started kind of questioning faith, you know, because I'm kind of similar to Craig. I've been raised in a very fundamentalist evangelical environment my whole life, you know, so that was all I ever knew. It was the whole like, this is what it means to be a Christian, like, and us in our particular denomination, in our particular, we are the ones that have it right and everybody else has it wrong. And this is exactly how the Bible is interpreted, and this is what everything in it means. And if you don't believe exactly what we're telling you, then you aren't in the club, you know? And so that does produce a lot of like, well, gosh, I don't want to lose my belonging. So that leads to, I think, a lot of people, you know, where you said you're banging your head against the wall trying to get the gay out, because it's like that loss of belonging is so scary. And yeah, and I think for me, that was one of the biggest things for me when I started looking at what I had always believed. It was when it stopped lining up with my lived experience, you know, where I was going, okay, this is what I've been taught my whole life is to be true. But now I have this gay friend that I'm really close to who loves Jesus and wants to be a part of things in the church. And yet I've been told my whole life that this isn't okay. And now I'm going, I don't understand that. Like, I don't. And so really that led me to start really exploring, you know, and going, this is not making sense to me, you know? And so, yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people that are watching right now that have similar experiences of coming from a church background where it's like, this is what you can get to believe. This is what you have to believe in order to belong. This is how it is. What we're saying, the Bible said, like, this is how it's interpreted. This is the right thing, you know, and there's no room for any kind of question, you know, and I just think it's going to lead to more and more people saying, well, if that's the case, I don't want anything to do with that, you know? Whew. Yeah, thank you guys all for sharing all those things. And it's just I think it'll give all of us a lot to sit with and to think about. Okay, so you've shared a little bit about your background and kind of where you are now. How would you each say over time, so from kind of the way you were raised up until now, what are some ways that your belief system has evolved over time? So
Let's see, I guess for me, I came from a conservative Christian household, which of course dramatically changed over the years. It did become more open and accepting. So as we basically like switched to the Bible studies and the occasional church visit, I was more on my own, I guess, in terms of developing my beliefs and kind of figuring out where I landed on everything. And then I grew up with the hate the sin, not the sinner dialogue. So my parents were always loving people. They never encouraged me to hate someone else because of their sexuality or gender expression. And now they're actually affirming as well. And in college, my friendships with a variety of people, including LGBTQIA plus friends, other queer folks, firmly cemented my belief that God wants us to love and accept everyone instead of condemning them for being themselves. I could never bring myself to hate someone just because they were different than me. I always judged someone based on their character and how kind of a person they were. So I became affirming as well. I would never had it in me basically to be that way. But this led me to kind of push away the Bible for a number of reasons. Christians were using the Bible to discriminate against queer folks, so I couldn't trust it anymore.
Wow.
I couldn't open a book that said God wanted this horrible behavior to happen. For years, I couldn't reconcile my experience and view of God as a loving being with the God that other Christians saw in the Bible who hated queer folk for just being who they were. This also didn't make any sense because if God created everyone in the rainbow, then he certainly had to love them too. At some point I read the Bible all the way through, but I still haven't picked it up in years. Like the wall has definitely come down more since I started interacting with this group, but I still have a lot of work to do before I'm like actually picking this up and saying, yes, this is something I want to read and something I value.
Wow.
I felt I had no choice but to distance myself from the Bible in order to keep being a good, loving person, which is kind of sounds crazy, but that's the way I felt, who knew a loving God because others kept using it as a weapon until recently. Last September, I saw the post from one of the clarity messages that Dan did on Facebook on my birthday weekend. Then I saw Kelly's post about the chaos that Icon had recently gone through because of that series and the decision to change the church to be completely accepting, affirming of LGBTQIA plus Christians and queer folks. And in my 34 years on this earth, I had never seen a pastor share the affirming interpretation of all genders and sexualities based on Bible verses. I'd never seen anyone do that in my life. I was blown away, and that one video actually changed a lot. I finally feel like I can match the loving God I know with what's in the Bible, and I'm not scared or angry at the book anymore.
Wow.
I messaged Kelly to let her know that I supported the changes they had made in the church and to let her know how impactful what they had shared was on me personally. After that, I went to my first virtual Icon meetup on Sunday. Not only was I attending church again, and I hadn't been a joiner for years, so not only am I actually attending church again and participating, I no longer felt the need to avoid God's word. I felt like all of the aspects of my spiritual life could finally actually come back together again because I had been holding them off and keeping that in a separate place for a very, very long time. So I just wanted to thank Dan and Kelly wholeheartedly for their bravery and sacrifice and putting themselves out there and doing what needed to be done. I know you guys experienced a lot of hurt during that process, and I'm so sorry for the suffering and uncertainty you guys had to go through during that change. I know Dan, from what you guys said in the video, that you did take a brunt of the conflicts and that you guys had to deal with that a lot. So I just wanted to say that the sacrifices were not meaningless. I'd never seen a pastor or a spiritual leader share that viewpoint before, and it literally changed my life and the way I view the Bible. Because again, I was keeping that up for a very, very long time and just could not engage with it because I saw so many people using it in negative ways that I couldn't open it anymore. Which has definitely changed since then. And again, I haven't taken that. There's still definitely a wall there. I haven't taken that step to actually pick it up again, but I am a lot more open now to including that in my spiritual life than I was before, which is pretty cool. So basically, you guys confirmed who I thought God was for years, which is literally the biggest spiritual gift I have ever received from anyone. So I just want to say thank you again for that.
It's amazing.
And I just wanted to say that my experiences with both Dana and Kelly through Icon have been transformational and reignited my spiritual growth and faith that God loves all and accepts all and is for us all, not just for certain
Huh.
Sorry, that was really long.
No, thank you. Thank you for the kind words and just thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that. Like, even what you said about how you're just not there yet with being able to pick up the Bible, like, that's so, I love
I'm
you
working
feel
on
like
it.
you can say, like, but that's real. Like, that is real. Like, there was like a period of like 6 months when everything in my faith felt like it was imploding. And for like 6 months, I couldn't even read the Bible. And like, but like,
Just 6 months?
I mean, like, you know. But do you know, like, the reaction that that gets when you tell people that? Like, they're like, oh my God, you know, and it's like, no, that's actually, so I love that you said that, because that's so honest and real. And that is, and I think sometimes that's necessary. Like if there's something that has been used as a weapon against you so much, and when you pick it up and read it, it's very difficult to be able to see past those things. Well, then it's not doing what like if it's not bringing you wholeness and love and goodness, then I think it should be put away for a little while. I know I'm, you know, people are probably like, oh my God, the pastor is saying not to read the Bible. Like, I'm just saying, like, I think that I think that God is big enough to handle us not reading the Bible for a while if it's like causing us harm and pain, you know? So, but yeah, that, I mean, man, what an incredible story. And just thank you for being so honest and vulnerable and sharing that with all of us. Like, I feel really lucky that we get to be a part of that, and that we get to hear you share that. So thank you.
Hey, Eamon.
No, I was just gonna say that I'm kind of glad my camera quality is shit, because I was
Well, I have a whole bunch of tissues here because I knew at some point when I read that,
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Oh, I did.
We're all just like, okay.
Like, yeah, I need to wear makeup on my eyeballs today. It's like, no mascara.
Yeah.
It looks like I'm in a goth concert or something. Like streaks on my face.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love that so much. Craig, how about you? How has your beliefs, your kind of worldview and belief system shifted over time?
Well, Kelly, I think we've talked about this in little ways. I don't know that we've ever like really sat down, and maybe a little bit more with Dan, but you know, I think there's a lot of similarities. Belief was static, almost like a filing cabinet, right? Like you get your beliefs and you file them away. And even with the Bible, it's you use these verses to answer these questions and refute these, you know, whatever problems that people have. And so you go to your file cabinet and you like filter through, and then you pull out your answer, and you know, you believe the right things and you're okay.
Yeah.
Because right belief was everything. And even, you know, being a pastor for a long season was making sure that I had all of the right answers to all of the questions that people were asking, because it's much easier to have somebody else tell you how to think, feel, and believe than to do the real work ourselves. And in a lot of ways, I mean, not to be too critical on some people, because certainty makes us feel safe.
Yeah.
There's a level within certainty that it makes us feel like we're okay, that there's something that we can cling to. But now I would say that right belief is less important to me than right action toward one's neighbor in particular. And so when I think about belief now, I think ultimately how we treat people is what we believe.
Yeah.
Catherine, you were talking about this earlier, and it's kind of like you can say that you are loving and you serve this loving God, but if by your actions you're actually treating people with hate and suspicion and putting them on the outside because of things that they cannot help or change, then that's what you really believe. You don't believe in love, you believe in something else. And the concept that really helped me the most with this, and I heard it first from Richard Rohr, but it's really Ken Wilber, who also talks a ton about human consciousness and growth, and his concept of transcend and include. Because as I was starting to shift my beliefs, the temptation for me was just to reject everything and start over, right? Like, let's get rid of all of the BS and we're just going to start all the way over. And what the idea of transcend and include helped as my belief system started to change is I was able to look back, if not at physical beliefs, but at least within the motivations behind some of those beliefs, to go, what was good in those seasons and how can I bring the good into this season here and now, and not throw everything out. And so that's, as my belief system has evolved, I think what has changed the most is I've gone back and started to pull forward things that were good that I was able to reclaim. And for some people, there are things that I was able to reclaim that they may never reclaim. And that's okay. The point isn't, and this is the biggest thing that's changed for me, the point is no longer to get everybody to think, feel, and believe exactly the way I do.
Yes.
The point really is just to recognize we're all on this journey together, and we're all trying to figure out, the answers to, and it's not even the answers. We're all trying to just process the biggest questions that life throws at us. And it's in the differences in our answers, and it's in the diversity of our experiences that growth starts to happen now. And so, that's kind of where I'm at. It's more of an embracing of somebody believing something different than I believe no longer threatens my belief system anymore.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Because I think I was raised in churches under pastors and faith leaders where there was a lot of, at least for me, I kind of had this learned behavior of being afraid of anyone who thought differently, or anyone who, who came from a different religious tradition. There was so much fear surrounding that. And it was always that, like, well, if you hang around with someone who thinks differently, you gotta be careful because they're gonna bring you down. They're like, you're gonna give the devil a foothold. That's, you know what I mean? It's a slippery slope, but it was legitimate. Like, there was that fear of, if I listen to, or, hang out with someone who thinks really differently from me, then it was always like, well, be careful because they might bring you down, And so, there was just this. Yeah.
See, I used to have that same thought as well. And one day I realized that, holy Jesus, I am the devil. but I love what Craig was talking about, the filing system, because I have a whole cabinet of files in me that I think for a period of time I can only approach religion from an intellectual perspective. I always distance myself emotionally from it. And even when I was doing my theology degree, I've always approached it from an intellectual perspective. I have this morbid curiosity of trying to understand people who are different from me. But I think that clarity video was the first time, because I was doing research on my papers, right? And that clarity video was the first time that I've integrated emotion and intellect when approaching religion. So I think, like what Catherine was saying, that I had that same reaction to watching that video. I was like bawling my eyes, I was crying, and I didn't even know that I had those suppressed emotions in me. And so that was quite a turning point for me in how I perceived Christianity and other Christians, and how I did not even realize that this deconstruction thing, faith deconstruction, existed until probably 3 weeks ago. And so when you were talking about also this is what I'm going through, so I get what you're saying as well.
So cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that probably hear that word deconstruction and are like, I don't even know, what do you mean by that? And so, I think, and I know for me, I think, I started sort of re-examining and reimagining my faith. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago when it all kind of first started, but it's been an ongoing process of kind of deeply, no longer being afraid to deeply interrogate the things that I believe, realizing, and we talked about this, the past couple of weeks, we did a series called Who is God, but we were talking about how who we believe God to be matters, because the beliefs we hold about God influence the way that we treat other people and treat ourselves and the way that we move in the world. And so I think that was when I first started this process, it was like, I started to realize, I think I just lived so disconnected for so long, you know, where it was like, I had my filing cabinet of beliefs. It was like these things that I was right, everybody else was wrong, because here in the year of our Lord, you know, 2021, 42 years, you know, I have it all figured out. You know what I mean? So I think coming to that realization of like, oh my goodness, people for millennia have been trying to figure out what God is like and who God is. And I really think that right now, like that I'm right on everything I believe, you know, and so, but it's been an ongoing process. Like I'm not finished, you know, like I think while I have been able to kind of pick up some pieces and put some things back together and kind of reimagine God and faith and find something that I feel is healthy and whole and full of love and goodness, there are still so many things that I don't know, that I'm still learning, you know, and I think there's been, over the past 6 years, there have been, like, I think we could probably spend hours, each of us, sharing the different things that we've shifted on or the things that we've changed our mind on. But I wonder if maybe just if you could each just maybe pick one thing out of all of the many that you've maybe shifted on or changed your mind on over the course of your faith, and maybe just share with us a little bit about that, like what that is and kind of what that process was like for you when you made that, when you changed your mind on that thing. And I want to be really clear for people too, like I think this isn't about like taking the scriptures and just kind of going, well, I don't like that, so I'm just going to throw that out. Like it isn't, this is all deeply rooted. And I'm don't want to speak for all of you, but I know for me, this process, I didn't change my mind like in spite of scripture. Like I changed my mind because of it, and because of it,
100%.
because of a deep love for God and for how compelled I am by the person of Jesus, and like genuinely wanting to love and do good in the world. That's where a lot of, as we're changing our minds, it's not just a flippant thing. I just want to kind of preface this by saying that I know for me at least, it has been a very excruciating process at times, you know, of kind of deeply interrogating things. So, but yeah, I'd love to hear from you all. What is maybe one thing that you have changed your mind about when it comes to theology or the way that you view the world or God or
So, well, my childhood concept of God was kind of similar to yours, Kelly, you were talking about last week, where it was he was a being who required me to behave and follow all of his rules for me to be worthy of his time, attention, and love. And then as I got older and went off to college, I began growing into myself as an adult and realizing that my obsession with perfectionism was that I kind of needed to get beyond that. So I began the journey of loving myself as I was and presenting myself to God with no filter, which is, you know, pointless anyway, because he knows who we are at the bottom of our hearts anyway. After a while, I finally realized that God has always known me and loved me for me and would always love me no matter what. I began to see him more as a loving, life-affirming being who cared for me and who was cheering for me every step of the way instead of the scorekeeper. I said, you know, basically, this is me, you know, here I am, Lord, like, you know, this, I'm not pretending anymore. And he said, well, duh, like, I've done that the entire time. Like, who are you kidding? And I've always loved you and always will. And our God created us all in his image and loves every single one of us. So it was more about my switch from thinking that God was this, you know, this being who was really just all about judging everybody and saying, well, if you don't do this correctly, then you're less of a Christian or you're more of a Christian. So it was more about realizing that, hey, he created us all this way. He knows we're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. So it's okay to like relax a little bit into the relationship with him and just be yourself. So.
Yeah, that's really good. Because again, who we believe God to be matters. It affects our actual real life and how we view ourselves and others. And yeah, that's a huge shift. I just wonder how many Christians are walking around doing the things they do and believing the things they believe because they're terrified of what God will do to them, if they veer off from that path, and that's, yeah, I get that.
For sure. If I could, I want to give just a quick little picture of how this felt when one belief kind of was pulled out. And I think what we did in a lot of circles within Christianity is we developed what I would call a house of cards theology.
Yeah.
You build this super intricate house of cards, and every belief is a card in there, and it's critical to the delicate structure, right? And then what happens is we pull one card out, and this is why so many people are so resistant to being open-minded to changing some of their beliefs, because if you pull one card out, then the entire house collapses. And so for me, that first card was the Bible. And it happened, Kelly, in the way that you said it, we were planting a church, and we were trying to figure out what kind of church do we want to be? What kind of community do we want to really be? And as you ask those questions, you see that there is this dissonance between a lot of times what you hear within church culture and the experience of actually following a God that is love.
Yeah.
And that we then become that love embodied. Because so many ways that we interacted with people within church culture, we dress it up and say that it's love, but when you strip it away, it's not. And so what started to fall for me, the first thing was the Bible, and it was studying with the intent of understanding the deeper context, really opening to the broader tradition of Christianity than just my little denominational circle, and reading an array of theological perspectives. I mean, shocker, shouldn't we, if we're looking for what the Old Testament really meant, shouldn't we start looking, even as Christians, at Jewish authors? Because they kind of wrote it. So, that, like, that's where it started to shift for me. It was one really simple idea. We spoke a lot about the inerrancy of Scripture. Well, there's one problem. Inerrancy is found nowhere in the Bible. So if we're going to say something of the Bible, shouldn't it be in the Bible? And so, like, that, I know it is, I mean, it is funny, and it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it, because now looking back, it's shocking. It's so logical. But that was like the first thing, and it felt like this delicate structure, this house of cards was like collapsing. I'm just trying to catch all the cards as they're falling, That
is like the best picture I can think of when people start shifting in their faith. And because it feels like, well, if this changes, then you're just running around like trying to that is so accurate. Yeah, I think we just have, so often we find in Christianity, there's such binary ways of thinking, and it's this either or kind of thing, where it's like you said, if one card falls, that means you have to throw everything out. If there's one thing in the Bible, that isn't historically true, then that means you throw out the whole thing, and that's kind of how I think a lot of people feel. And it does feel really scary, and really, you kind of feel like you're in a free fall when you start to question these things that you have been told your whole life. And, like we'll say, let's take the book of Jonah, for instance. Oftentimes we have this either or thinking, where it's like, well, either this is historically factual and accurate. A fish literally, swallowed a human being, and they were in the fish's belly for 3 days. And if it's not, and there are some people watching that you maybe have a more literal reading of the Bible. I'm not trying to say that like you're bad or you're wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that if, for me, where I've come to is, it's not either that's historically accurate and true or the whole Bible is wrong. It's this when I look at the book of Jonah, I don't approach it anymore as that actually literally happened. However, there is still so much truth to be found in the story of Jonah. And that's, I feel like for a long time, because I was so hung up on, well, did this actually happen? I was missing a story about xenophobia and about like kind of how God wants to redeem those that we hate or that we think are other. And to me, that's the greater truth. And sometimes we miss those things when we get so hung up on, well, I have to prove this actually happened or else the whole Bible, you have to throw it out. And it's like, well, we put things on the text that the text doesn't even put on itself. The Bible doesn't claim to necessarily have everything in it be exactly historically accurate. We put that on the scriptures, and we miss
sure.
out on what the scriptures are trying to teach us and the wisdom it has to offer when we focus on that part of it. So yeah, I'm with you. It's the whole house of cards thing. It is real. It is so real.
Well, interpretation is
Yeah.
so subjective. Interpretation is so subjective. I mean, I was originally a zoology major, and of course we were learning about evolution and all of that stuff. And of course, I was trying to reconcile the creationism story in the Bible with evolution, and the fact that there's a scientific proof that says that the earth took billions of years to accumulate. And so then I realized, I started thinking about it, and I realized, wait a second, so God does not see time the way we do. And if it's not literal, those 7 days could actually have been 7 days to him, and it could have been billions of years in our perception of time. So it doesn't really mean that everything is exact. It's just, it's definitely open to interpretation, which leads to kind of trying to figure everything out. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It was game changing too, because that story was one in particular that really affected me.
The creation story.
Because I heard so many people that were like, well, if that's not a literal 7 days, then how can I believe anything in the Bible? And you're starting with like page 1 and you're going, if that's not true, then how can I believe anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely, I hear that. And what changed it really for me was I heard somebody, I think it might've been Rob Bell, said we need to be less concerned about reading the Bible literally and more concerned with reading it literately, meaning understand the literature that we're reading. So if the opening of Genesis is a poem, then what poem have you ever read that was meant to be taken 100% literal? And that started to really Genesis.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So Catherine, for you, it was kind of how you saw God. Craig, for you, it was the Bible. Eamon, what about you? What is something that maybe a long held belief or something maybe that is oftentimes can be kind of considered like a staple belief for the Christian tradition, that maybe you've changed your mind about, or that you see differently maybe from other Christians that you know?
Okay, I don't want to completely say it's Christianity. I was thinking more of like, for the longest time I always thought that people with religion are the biggest hypocrites. That was the belief that I had, and I think it took me quite a bit of time to be able to look at my trauma and look at where my pain was coming from, and to go into this place of forgiveness. And I think once I lifted that lens, that I was seeing it through that hate and that anger and that unforgiveness that I was holding on to, I could see that. I'm not saying that I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that problem is not there. I'm just saying that I could see both the problem and the solution. I could see the good and the bad. I could see the divisiveness and the collaboration, So I think for me, being able to see without that lens was something that was important for me to move forward with faith. And I also like the fact that you were mentioning about what's the greater truth. And that I think that's an important thing to note when reading the Bible as well, because I think my favorite ones are obviously Genesis, and it's just there's just so much story there and so much visual, and at the same time you're like wondering, this is so mystical, that did it really happen? And that's where most of the questions come in, you know, like what's the reality of this, what's the fact, and what's the truth.
Yeah.
And I also like what Craig was talking about, the house of cards. And I like that saying that every generation has to rediscover faith for themselves, because then the connection and the bond with religion is not just a superficial bond where one thing is yanked away and the whole thing falls apart. So yeah.
Yeah. You know, the Spirit is always doing that, is always pulling people forward. And in that process, we have to understand that that probably means that there are things that we currently believe that we're wrong about, that we don't have the full picture. You know, Scripture tells us we see through a glass dimly. We can't know all of it. And so I think it's so important to kind of, if we have a house of cards faith, I think one of the most important things we can do is to kind of shift our thinking to, we can deeply interrogate the scriptures. They will hold. Like, we can deeply interrogate the character and nature of God. God can handle it. God is big enough. Like, we can press really, really hard on belief systems, and we can question and ask really hard questions. And none of that is going to, like, none of that is going to disqualify us from being a person of faith and from being a Christian or whatever tradition we hold to, you know? So yeah, I think it's just so important for us to not be afraid to pull on the cards, to pull on the thread, you know, to know that even if things do come crashing down, well, then that gives us a chance to reconstruct and rebuild and reimagine what faith should be, you know?
Kelly, a really good friend of ours, Drew Epperson,
Mm.
challenged me, and I don't even know if he remembers this conversation, but he was supposed to be speaking at our church, and rather than preparing like before, he and I went and got coffee, and my thought was I'll just let him sit in the corner and, you know, go over his notes and stuff. He's like, no, I'm good. And we were just, we were just talking, and it already threw me. Um, what beliefs do you hold that if they weren't true, it would completely wreck your faith and you wouldn't be a Christian anymore? And, you know, we were kind of talking about that. And one of the things that he said later was, he goes, if your entire basis of your faith is built on a singular belief or even a series of beliefs, then your entire faith is not built on faith at all. It's built on certainty of that being true. And that, like, that really pushed me, because I had like those one or two things that I'm like, these things have to be true. And if they're not true exactly the way that I believe them, then I don't know that I can be a Christian or call myself a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. Craig, I liked what you were saying too about certainty, because I think that, you know, for a lot of us, that is, certainty is really central to a lot of our belief system, you know, where it's like we feel like that's what makes us a good Christian, is if we're certain, you know, that if we know. And I think that, yeah, certainty makes you feel really safe. It makes you feel like you're right, and we all want to be right, you know? And so, yeah, I think when you move from certainty to going, actually, none of us know, like we don't know. We are all doing our best to interpret this ancient text that was written a very long time ago by a lot of different people who were all trying to figure out who God is. We're just doing our best to interpret scripture and because anything that we've been taught about the Bible has all been interpreted by a person, you know, like it's all human people trying to do their best to figure out what this is saying and what this means. And so I think for us to claim that we know exactly what this means is the height of arrogance, you know, that's why it's faith. It's because we have a belief system, but none of us can say we know this for sure, you know? So obviously we've all had things about our faith evolve and change. You know, Eamon, you've went from very religious background to atheism, you know, back to kind of, I think you said kind of like a universalist. Is that kind of where what you would call? Yeah. You know, we've all have come to different places in our faith. So in the middle of all that, all of the ways that your faith has evolved and changed, and the question I have, what compels you to still be drawn to the Christian tradition? But I think even a better way to put that is, what is compelling to you, kind of about the person of Jesus, like this idea of still being a part of the Christian faith and of following this way of Christ. What compels you to that, despite everything you've had to sift through, all of the baggage, all of the trauma, all of the questions and doubts? Like, what about the person and the message of Jesus and Christianity is compelling to you?
Interesting. Well, personally, see, my personal evolving relationship with God really has just kept me centered, even when I haven't been involved with other groups. I've always talked to him daily through random small prayers, but my spiritual life has grown a lot over the past year, which is awesome. And then I finally let go of my fear of listening to the wrong influences. So I started meditating more too, which is really cool. I opened myself up to really listen to God more and connect with him, because I wanted to pursue him as enthusiastically as he pursues me. A relationship is a two-way street. You want to see more of God in your life, you have to be willing to reach out and actually take a step forward, because he's not going to push you into it. You know, freedom of choice and all that. No matter what happens, we'll always have this, regardless of whether I'm a member of a church or not. I'll still have that relationship. And which to me is really the most important thing. I want to know this being of light and love who created such beautiful things and such beautiful people. And then despite the social, emotional, and mental damage that the church, quote unquote, has caused to Black, Indigenous people of color and queer folks, LGBTQIA plus communities over the years through missionary work and the condemnation of queer individuals, now that I know that there are real Christians out there, like everyone at Icon, who are genuine, I'm also more motivated to stick around and be a part of a group again as well. I've never met another church that actually got involved with social justice issues. I mean, I've never experienced that ever before, where I felt supported and seen, or that truly accepted all of God's people, not just the ones who fit their mold. The last 4 years of blatant racism from people who called themselves Christians in support of Trump were deeply infuriating, traumatizing, and mentally and emotionally exhausting. Pastor Kelly messaged me several times during the past 5 months to check on me when things got crazy, especially like the Capitol riot that happened a few weeks ago or a few months ago. For example, just to make sure I was okay and like not in a hole somewhere. So just for me personally, I've never met more loving, real people who love God and actually show what we call agape love to everybody, including their LGBTQIA plus queer sisters and brothers. I've never met a church group that actually allows me to fully love everyone, regardless of their skin color, their expressed gender, or sexual orientation. So that's, to me itself, is amazing. And it just motivates me to like connect to other people, to other Christians more, to know that there are people out there who reflect, well, I guess that might sound discriminatory, but who reflect my idea of a loving God, who are not really judgmental and who are okay with kind of like making those probing statements and questioning things and trying to figure out who God is for them, instead of like making them fit in this little teeny box and like disciplining them if they don't stay there. So yeah, I mean, my relationship really is the focus, which should be for everybody. I mean, church is awesome and that connection is great, but if you're going to church and you don't have the relationship, or you're not pursuing that, then you're just kind of, it feels empty. So that's really a big part of it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's like a whole, like when you started talking about, you know, racism within the church, I'm like, we're gonna have to do like a whole other Zoom call to have you talk about that, because like I'm like, that's a whole nother conversation. And just really, I mean, just I'm really glad that you said that and brought that up, because that's real. That is real.
Yeah.
So for me, Christianity still does something to me. There's something about this tradition that makes me come alive. And when I can look past all of the issues that I have, or that we have just overall within Christianity, in its purest form, following the way of Christ, I have found that there is so much grace, so much love, so much hope, so much joy. One of my favorite authors that I found as I was kind of wrestling with a lot of this stuff, her name is Barbara Brown Taylor. She wrote a book called, which if you ever hear just an interview with her, she's phenomenal. But she wrote a book called Leaving Church, and then another one called Holy Envy. And there's a quote in Holy Envy, and I wrote it down, but she says, however many other religious languages I learn, I dream in Christian. However much I learn from other spiritual teachers, it's Jesus I come home to at night. And she was interviewed about that quote. And so she had this quote about that quote. And I wrote this down. I thought her explanation was so good. And it resonated with, as I was processing this question, it resonated with the way that I feel. And she said, we don't learn to speak language. We learn to speak a language. It's very particular. So the stories of Christianity were so much a part of what had shaped my character, my views, my practices, that it would have been foolhardy for me to leave it when I was so embedded in it. And so I decided to stick with the language that I knew and the language that I loved. It was a matter of recognizing that part of my DNA, which is already so Christian in my formation, and it seemed better to reform it rather than to shed it or to shrink it. And for me, that just really spoke to me as to kind of how I feel. It's the language that I know, and I feel at home there.
I'm going to quote Craig on this one, because what he said about I feel at home in faith is, I'm going to take that from you and I'll just put it in as my answer.
Yeah.
And also, and also I have to say that every single Sunday before service and after service, my heart just sings, just being able to be a part of the community and to share the common love and that sense of oneness with one another. I think that's the thing that stays true for me with regards to faith. And there is a sense of emptiness when I was previously not in faith, and now it's a healthy understanding, and I feel really at home in this feeling.
Yeah, that is really beautiful, where you feel at home there, Yeah, it's like, as much as, and again, I know that in this conversation, like, there are just so many particular things we could talk about. I mean, this is a conversation that just, like, for today, I'm looking at this as like, this is kind of a starting point for people, like, just to kind of hear our stories and, y'all's experiences, and to be able to kind of find themselves in that and figure out where they're at. And, I just think, I know for me, there are many things that I've laid down, like through the years of once I finally got past my initial fear of, like, reimagining faith and, like, going, okay, am I doing this? Okay, here we go. And once I kind of got past that, I just kind of was like, man, let's just lay it all out there and let's deeply examine each thing, and be willing to, listen to voices that I haven't listened to before, realizing that, oh my goodness, like, the theology that I was handed throughout my life was a very white evangelical theology. There weren't, I mean, I didn't even realize the extent to other things out there, other voices, other opinions, other interpretations, and very, like, people who deeply love scripture and who have so much, love and care for the church and just for the way of Jesus and all of that. And I mean, through finding, Black theologians with liberation theology, and finding queer theology, and listening to Indigenous people. I mean, it's like, it blows open this whole thing. And I think that through all of it, as I've listened to other voices and really interrogated everything, I think through all of it, the one thing that I have found that has remained for me is Jesus. Even though there's a lot of days, I mean, there'll be days that it's so funny, like the first week of Who is God, literally that morning I woke up and was like, is this real? I was like, do I believe in God? I don't know. Like, I had one of those moments, where I was like, I don't even know if I believe all that, but I think through all of it going, but God's big enough for that and can handle that. And through all of it, even though I don't have any certainty anymore, there's just something to me that's still so compelling about the way of Jesus and the way that Jesus loved and cared for people and included people and empowered those that were pushed to the margins. And so do any of you guys have any final thoughts or anything that you want to, share with people before we wrap it up?
I think I already said too much.
Well, you guys, thank you. I mean, everything you guys shared, you were just so transparent and vulnerable. And it was just it was a gift to be able to sit here and talk with all of you and have this conversation. And I'm just really grateful for you all taking the time to do that and forgiving of yourselves and just being open. That just means a lot to me. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was
Thank
definitely
you
fun.
as well.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today for that conversation. It's one of my favorite ones that we've had, as far as the community conversations go. And I hope that it was helpful for you, that maybe it caused you to think, to ask some good questions. I hope there were some things in that conversation that resonated with you. And then we'd love to invite you to join us again next week, where we are going to be having another community conversation about parenting through deconstruction, parenting through, how do you parent your kids when you don't even know what you believe, and what does that look like, and how does that change the way that you kind of talk to your kids about faith. And so I'm really looking forward to that. So I'd love to invite you next week to join us for that. We are going to be only online next week. So for those of you joining us here online today who are local and you sometimes come in person, next week on the 20th, we are going to be online only. We have some more staff travel coming up, and it's just simpler for us sometimes to just do it only online. So we'd love to invite you to join us. Feel free to invite folks to tune in. Maybe you have friends who, who are parents who maybe are asking some of these questions about what does it look like, when you are changing your mind about things or figuring out your faith, what does that look like when it comes to our parenting? So feel free to invite some folks to tune in. We'd love to have you tune in next week. And I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will see you right back here next Sunday.